I'm Tyler Austin from Gungnir Strategic. Thank you so much for watching. So this is going to be a quick review of the ND-30 Distraction Device by NEXTORCH. I am full disclosure when it comes to my reviews whenever there's something to disclose to you. And for this, I want to let you know that NEXTORCH did send this out to me for free for the purposes of testing and review. I am full disclosure because that's the honorable thing to do whenever I am reviewing a product. Anyways, with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and give you some technical aspects of this device, and then I'll move on to more of my review, my thoughts on it, and what I think this is going to be best used for both training and possibly operational use. Right off the bat, this is going to be what is known as an electronic distraction device, meaning it uses electronics to emit both light and sound for the means of distracting, as opposed to a conventional flashbang that utilizes explosives and pyro for distraction. I brought the box so that way I don't misrepresent any information. So you can see that the body of the device, flashbang if you want to call it that, is covered in LEDs, and these LEDs strobe at 11,000 lumens in total. So it's definitely bright, and it strobes really bright, and it's definitely noticeable. You'll see how bright it strobes in the B-roll that I'll be playing throughout this video, of course. So 11,000 lumens in total with the LEDs, and the sound that it emits, it's basically a siren, and that siren blares at 130 decibels, which is, it's not deafeningly loud, but it is certainly loud and annoying. Just for comparison for you, your general smoke detectors, modern smoke detectors in your house, when those go off, those produce right around 120 decibels. So this is noticeably louder than your smoke detectors going off. The entire body is aluminum, and this thing is definitely built very well and very tanky, which is very important, especially as a training tool. I'll get to that here in a second. But aluminum body, tough, it's definitely built well. And the form factor, it is formed like most modern flashbangs, conventional flashbangs that is on the market, which is also really good for training purposes. Moving on from there, it has 4 modes in which you can pick from. Mode 1 is just going to be a quick little blurb of the strobe and the siren, and you can utilize that 4,400 times per full charge. And this is what mode 1 looks like. Mode 2 is going to be 2 times strobe and sound, so 2 cycles of the strobe and sound, and you can utilize that 300 times per full charge. Here's what mode 2 looks like. Next, we have mode 3, which is 9 cycles of the strobe and sound, and you can use that 80 times per full charge. And then you have mode 4, which is 12 continuous seconds of strobe and sound. So there's no cycles, it's just 12 seconds of continuous strobe and sound. Here's what mode 4 looks like. You can use that 65 times per full charge. So those are the 4 modes you can pick from. On top of that, you can also program how long the delay is. So the delay being the delay between when the spoon is released and when the device actually goes off. And you have 4 modes to select from there. One is a half-second delay, 1 second delay, 1.5 second delay, and then finally a 3-second delay. And again, that is going to be the delay between when the spoon is released and when the device actually goes off. One nice thing about this too is in order to rearm it, all you have to do is reattach the spoon and repin it, and then at that point the device is rearmed and ready to use, which is very convenient, especially when you're just trying to get a bunch of reps with it in a training environment. Anyway, so that's all the technical aspects I wanted to get out of the way. So now let's move on to, I guess you could say, my review and what I think is going to be the most practical application of this device. First and foremost, I want to get this out of the way. Is this as effective as a conventional flashbang? No, it is not. There is no electronic flashbang, whether it is the ND-30 or any other electronic flashbang on the market, that is going to be as effective as a conventional flashbang. And why is that? It's because it lacks the number one thing that a conventional flashbang utilizes for the means of distracting, and that is going to be overpressure and concussion. Because conventional flashbangs utilize explosives and pyro for their means of distracting, they produce a lot of overpressure in that room. Like if you've never been in a room where a conventional flashbang has gone off and you're not ready for it, it feels like you are being pimp slapped.
What the hell did you say to me?
Peter, what are you doing?
You tripping, boy? You're going out if I tell you you're going out, bitch.
That's what the concussion and that overpressure feels like. The less you're prepared for it, the more the effect is. Now, it's not like the video games like Call of Duty or whatever, when the flashbang goes off, it looks like you're staring directly at God. That's not the effect it has. But that overpressure that those conventional flashbangs produce, it definitely has an effect, and it can definitely rock you.
And we want to convince them that they shouldn't do that.
If you're not prepared for it. And of course, electronic flashbangs are not capable of producing that overpressure. So not to say that they're completely ineffective, but they're not as effective as conventional flashbangs for that very reason. With that being said, these do definitely have a role, particularly in a training environment, because you can't just go running around deploying conventional flashbangs just all the time in a training environment. Number one, you're going to run out of Op4 or willing Op4 very quickly, because no one's going to appreciate you just constantly chucking bangs into the room that they're in as an Op4. So you're going to run out of willing participants for Op4 very quickly if you're that team that just constantly deploys flashbangs, conventional flashbangs that is, at your Op4. But on top of that, because conventional flashbangs utilize explosives and pyro, they're also very destructive and very good at setting things on fire. So the facilities in which you can deploy flashbangs in a training environment are going to be relatively limited for that reason. So I view this as predominantly a training device, and I think it would make for a fantastic training device. Mode 1 in particular is just when you're just looking to get constant reps with the team or whatever. And then modes 2, 3, 4 are going to probably be more utilized for both training and generally force on force as well. So because I view this as predominantly a training device, my general review on it was going to be how durable is it, particularly when being deployed on concrete floors constantly, because a lot of training facilities are going to utilize concrete floors. So this is going to be a training device that's going to have to be able to hold up to being constantly deployed onto concrete floors. So I did well over 50 throws with this device on concrete floors. Some of them were just, me being fairly gentle and rolling it onto the floor. That was predominantly just for me to get B-roll footage and actually get the device on camera. But most of those throws onto the concrete floor were from like legitimate tosses from chest height, and you'll see that all in the B-roll footage. And then I probably threw this thing another good 30 times on hardwood floors, dirt, pavement, and gravel as well. Just, me just throwing it outside a whole bunch of times. And even after all those pretty hard throws onto predominantly concrete, this thing is held up just fine. Obviously, the edges on where it was landing and stuff, they're knurled up and whatnot, and beat up. But in terms of functionality, this thing is still working just as well as it did out of the box. So it survived all of those throws, which is good, again, because as a training device, at least how I view it as, it's going to get used a lot and probably used a lot on concrete floors. So it needs to be durable. And this thing is definitely built well and built very durable. And it's, again, working just as well as it did out of the box. Now, moving on from a training environment, does this thing possibly have use in an operational setting? I'm going to say it can possibly have some niche use in more of a law enforcement context. Military, I'm not even going to speak on the military because just the military being the military, they're a lot less risk averse than law enforcement, and they're held to a lot less liability. So they're going to stick to conventional flashbangs as they should. But in a law enforcement context, I could see this being used in niche circumstances where they want to use a distraction device yet without the risk and liability that a conventional flashbang brings. Again, is this as effective as a conventional flashbang? No, but along with that, it does not hold the inherent risk and liability that conventional flashbangs bring, particularly in a law enforcement context. In a law enforcement context, conventional flashbangs are used rather sparingly. Again, this is going to be very department to department, of course. Each department's going to vary a little bit depending on how willing they are to use flashbangs. But most departments are going to be fairly risk adverse when it comes to deploying flashbangs for a variety of reasons. This kind of goes back to that whole, that joke when it comes to like self-defense shootings or whatnot, that there's a lawyer behind every bullet. When it comes to law enforcement, there's also a lawyer behind every flashbang deployment as well. For most departments aren't going to just blindly deploy flashbangs, conventional flashbangs, into rooms. So what I mean by blindly, meaning they're not going to just go up to an open door without getting any sight into what or who is in that room and just deploy a flashbang. Because for all they know, they just go up to an open door and throw a flashbang in it, and there is a toddler or an infant or someone's 92-year-old grandmother in the room, in which a conventional flashbang could certainly cause them harm, and then you have a whole liability issue in regards to that. Or, which is common for a lot of houses that SWAT teams raid, there's just trash and garbage all over the floor, and they deploy that flashbang into that room, and the flashbang inherently sets all that on fire, and now that room and the structure's on fire, and you have to deal with that whole mess, which is why when you see SWAT teams on approach to a structure and they're dropping off a whole bunch of kit and gear at the front of that structure, most of the time, if not all the time, there's a fire extinguisher as part of the kit that they drop off at the front of that house. So I could see this having a niche application for law enforcement use where they want to get some sort of distraction device into the room without the liability and risk that is inherent with a conventional flashbang. Is this as effective as a conventional flashbang? No, but it does not carry the same inherent risk that a conventional flashbang brings to the table. It emits a very bright strobe and an annoying loud sound, but it doesn't create that overpressure and certainly the fire hazard that conventional flashbangs produce. So not as effective, but it doesn't carry the same amount of risk, and it's one of those things where it's better than nothing. So I could see it having niche use in a law enforcement context. Another big one for law enforcement is going to be drug houses as well. So, meth labs and so forth, those things are inherent explosive hazards, and under no circumstances do you deploy any sort of explosive inside of a known or suspected meth house or any other drug house for that matter, because a lot of those places are just buildings waiting to explode. So if you deploy a flashbang in a meth house, for an example, it's probably going to be a very effective flashbang, considering you might as well have just thrown a Mark III into that room, because that entire building is likely to explode and come down on top of your team. Not great. On an operational level, I could see it having a niche use, but predominantly I view this more as a training device. And I think it would make for a great training device. It's durable enough to get plenty of reps in. It has a 2-year warranty, I believe. And on top of that, with modes 2 and 3 and 4, it certainly has enough of a distraction capability, certainly to use as a stand-in for like force on force, as opposed to using like a conventional flashbang. Anyways, that's all I really have to say on this. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm Tyler Austin from Gungnir Strategic. Thank you so much for watching.